In this video, I'm going to review and redesign the 2024 Mazda CX-90. We're going to talk about the exterior design, the interior design, and then we're going to take it for a drive. So let's get into it. A couple of years ago, Mazda introduced something that they called the Kodo design language, and that means empty surfaces and the beauty of sculpting those empty surfaces. And you can see that specifically here in this big SUV. This is a 2024 Mazda CX-90. So what we're gonna do in this video is, of course, have a look at the stunning front end design, the side view, which, as you can see, it looks like a calm ocean when you look at these surfaces, the rear view, the gorgeous interior, and then we're gonna take this for a drive. Under the hood, we have a 3.3-liter turbo inline 6 putting out 340 horsepower and 370 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 takes 6.5 seconds. It's connected to an 8-speed automatic. You have all-wheel drive. Fuel economy comes in at 23 city, 28 highway, and the price, as this one is spec'd, is $62,000. Starting with the front end design of the Mazda CX-90 in Artisan Red, which this color is called. This is also the top of the line trim level, so it comes in at about $62,000 for a Mazda. It's pretty crazy. I do love the design that we have here. Look at these beautiful surfaces that we have here. Very sculpted, very smooth. There's pretty much not a single sharp line here. The one sharp line that I want to see in the front end is, in fact, here, and that is this chamfer line that goes underneath the headlight. The headlights themselves sitting very deep in the sides of the front end, looking beautiful. Further down, we do have a functional air slot right here in the sides with the big Mazda grille in the middle and a splash of chrome, which usually I'm not a huge fan of, but as I'm going to show you, this chrome comes back all around this car, and since this is the big luxury SUV, I kind of feel like it suits this CX-90 to have some splashes of chrome on the exterior design. One detail I love in the front end are the indicator lights. You can see right here how it's beautifully integrated in this chrome piece, and it sort of pulsates, so it has this luxury vibe to it even in the light settings. Gives it more of a calming vibe just by looking at this pulsating orange light that they have in the front end. And I also like that everything here in the front is functional. So you have the big grille and it is completely open, the big Mazda logo in the front as well. You have this slot at the bottom, a little bit more chrome, and this intake is also completely open. And as we talked about, these side slots on the side are also functional, so there are no fakeness in this design. And these features, these functional air intakes in combination with the soft, smooth vibe that we have in the surfacing just makes up for a stunning looking front end of the Mazda CX-90. Let's jump into the redesign here of the Mazda CX-90. This being the big brother in the lineup of Mazda's SUVs, I understand that they want to have it be a pretty stately design. And what exactly does that mean? It means more boxy and less stylized than the smaller siblings, and I do think Mazda has done a great job implementing this in the CX-90. And Mazda also has a very strong brand identity, even though they don't use a lot of styling, and that comes down to the graphic features. I've said this so many times before. Now that we're moving into EVs, it feels like the surfaces and the proportions of cars are becoming more sleek. And as you know, this bean design that's been a trend for the last couple of years with EVs, we need to have strong graphic features to create this identity if everything else on the car is going to be so sleek and less stylized. And I think that's where Mazda has excelled when it comes to a new design language and this Kodo design philosophy. Even though this is not an EV, it still has that kind of vibe. So what I want to do here is, as you can see, I'm totally doing a face-off for this CX-90. I'm actually taking the front end from a concept from I think it was 2015. It is called the Mazda RX Vision concept. To me, that was one of the best concepts Mazda has ever done, because that was the start and the essence of this Kodo design. You can see it in the side view of that car, just how beautiful the surfaces flows. A light sort of reflects off the surfaces of the car, and I love the front end of that. And it's a shame they never put a car with that front end into production, because I think this could be, again, a new sort of identity for Mazda, specifically when you look at the headlights and the daytime running lights. What I love about this is you see the chamfer that houses the outside of the headlights that creates almost a wider body feel to this car and adds a little bit more structure in this otherwise very, very smooth design. And then you have this LED. I do believe it's an LED. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna make it into an LED anyway. This LED little strip that goes right above the headlight, and the outline for this looks to be the outline looks to be a traditional headlight, even though you have a piece of body color that is wrapped within this LED piece. I just think it's a beautiful design that definitely mixes the old school outline of a headlight, but the internal pieces are completely modern and brand new with this little LED strip that I'm sketching right here. The hardest thing here, making this work, this redesign, was to actually the color. So the RX Vision concept is more like a bright red, and this is artisan red. This CX-90 means it's a little bit more burgundy in its shape, so that mixing those and having that melt smoothly into the rest of the car was pretty much the hardest part here. Other than that, it was a pretty straightforward redesign. And actually, I was thinking if I wanted to change the lower part here in the front end of the CX-90 to have that chrome piece be black, but I think this being the CX-90, it's a little bit more luxurious. I still wanted to have the chrome intact in the front end. I know it's crazy to think about because I never pretty much use chrome in any of my redesigns, but for this, in this case, I think it actually suits the CX-90 to have a splash of chrome, as I talked about in the video, in the review as well. So overall, very fun redesign, and I'm happy with the result of this, and it looks very cool. It still looks proper Mazda. There is no mistaking this front face for anything but a Mazda. I think that has a lot to do with the outline and the chiseledness of the grille. Last but not least, I wanted to put some different wheels on here. Again, usually I don't go for black wheels, but I think black in this case, again, with this luxurious vibe, just feels right to have some big black wheels on this car, and I think that also suits the overall vibe and feel of this package that is the CX-90. In here you can see the before and after. I wouldn't say this is a substantial change. It's still very much Mazda, but I think this gives it a more sleeker, sportier look. Maybe not in line with the CX-90, the big brother, which has more of an upright, stately design, which I of course understand why they did it that way, but I just wanted to implement this front face on some of the on one model at least of Mazda and see what it could look like. Coming around to the side view of the CX-90, and here you can clearly see just how smooth everything is. We don't even have a sharp shoulder line in this design, and if you look at the sketches, Mazda these days, they always tend to have this big sort of indent here, which is very smooth, so you can see it if you have the light hitting it in the right way, going in this U shape in the side of the body, creating a bit more definition to the side instead of having it be just completely flat. And we also have the chrome coming back, as I told you, it's coming back in the side as well. So we have a splash of chrome right here on the side and here on the bottom, and it says Mazda in this lower section, adding a bit of luxury to these graphic features that we have in the side view. These are some pretty massive wheel and tire setup for the CX-90 because it's not staggered. We have the same size in the back that we have in the front, and the width of these tires are 275 millimeters up front even, and also of course in the rear with 21-inch wheels. Now this size of this SUV kind of makes the wheels not really look 21 inches, but I do think the overall design that we have of the wheels themselves look elegant, and it also brings in that luxurious feel with the wheel design itself, having these faces that are silver, and then the internal pieces of the wheel are black, looking good, and it has a nice contrast to them as well. Up here on the fender you do have a graphic feature. It's pretty much the only graphic feature on the exterior of the car that is not functional. It's just a badge sort of, and it says inline 6 here in chrome. You also have this chrome underline at the very bottom. It looks sort of cool, but I'm not sure if I would want to have that there or just remove it, or if I want to have it here, I kind of want to make it functional and open up these slots that we have up top. Looking at the overall proportions of the CX-90, I do think again it is a beautiful design, probably top 3 in this size of SUV, this being a 3-row SUV, meaning that we do need to extend the roofline all the way back here, you can see just how much of the volume of the overall proportions sit in the back. It makes it look almost rear heavy when you look at it like this, but still all the lines and all the surfaces just play really well together, and overall the side view is a fantastic view of how everything comes together in the proportions of the CX-90. Looking at the rear end, the only thing pretty much that I want to change here is I do still want to have the exhaust pipes visible at the very bottom. This, I understand that this is supposed to be a luxury-oriented SUV, and by that, usually what manufacturers do is sort of hide the exhaust, but in this case I just think it would help the design overall to have maybe some squarish exhaust down here at the bottom. It's very smooth here back as well, and we still have the pulsating indicator lights in the taillights, just like we have in the side mirrors and in the front end, in addition to a big juicy LED right here on the side that then stretches in and almost connects and creates a light bar, but they decided to cut it off and instead have the big Mazda logo right there in the center. Looking at the very bottom, you can see again that this splash of chrome comes back all around the car, and that is why I think it suits this car. First of all, it's a luxury SUV, a splash of chrome just works, and the fact that we have it connecting all around the car like this, it just makes it look pretty beautiful. If we open the trunk up, this is of course power assisted, you can see that we have a huge storage compartment back here, in addition to the two seats that are now folded down. But if you want to, it's very easy to just grab this handle and fold them back up. They are not power assisted, which I think you probably would expect for $62,000, but it's not that hard to figure out how these works. They go up and down pretty easily. Underneath here, you do have a lot of different compartments, not a big bay where you can just put whatever you want. Instead, it's divided into these small slots of storage, which I think is a pretty cool idea. So let's close this back up and let's talk about this interior. I think the interior overall is very nicely done. There are a couple of features in this specific one that I would probably want to switch out when it comes to the color and trim and the spec of this design. So let's jump into the interior and have a look. Now, one thing I think Mazda is doing really well these days, in addition to the exterior, is also the interior. So in this case, we have this white fabric material up top and in the doors, and my wife said she thought these looks like sweatband material, and I can't agree with that. I would much rather have the brown interior than this, but it still looks pretty cool. So let's fire this up and let's turn off the hazards and let's see what we got here. There are a couple of things that's pretty weird to me and that I don't understand why Mazda did it this way. For example, we have a 12.3-inch infotainment screen up here. The integration looks fine because we have this cutout for it, which looks nice. It doesn't stick up too much, but it definitely feels like this is something you can just take off the entire dash if you wanted to. The controls for the infotainment screen, this is a pretty interesting thing. The navigation itself, the menus and the software looks pretty basic to me, but I don't mind that because some of the cars today are way too advanced or too complex. So this is a pretty simple infotainment screen, and how you navigate the settings in the infotainment screen is just you use this rotary dial. It's pretty easy to use because the menus themselves are so easy, and you have all these preset buttons here, back navigation, home, and so on. The weird thing is I can't use this even if I'm in park right now. I can't use this as a touchscreen, which is super weird, but if I plug in my CarPlay, all of a sudden it is a touchscreen. So I'm not sure why Mazda did it that way. I would think that if I'm in park, I would be able to use it as a touchscreen because the car is not moving. Moving further down, we do have these air vents, very standard looking air vents, and we have the chrome coming back here and in the doors as well. So we have this chrome trim piece coming around here, creating a pretty nice framing for the air vents themselves. Moving further down, this is what I love about this interior because we have a complete control panel down here. This is all for the climate control settings, so you have physical buttons for whatever you want to adjust, temperature, fan speed, where the air is going to come out from, and you also have, this being a $62,000 luxury SUV, it comes with heated steering wheel and ventilated and heated seats as well, separate buttons for all of those functions. Further down, we do have the wireless charging and a 12-volt outlet here, cigarette outlet. Now this button down here is pretty interesting because it looks beautiful, and it's called Me Drive, and that's how you select the drive modes here. So you have 3 different drive modes. You have Sport, Normal, and Off-Road. I'm going to talk more about the driving experience when we take this on the road in just a minute. And right behind this drive mode button, you do have the gear selector, and this entire integration looks pretty, I would say, cheap to me, because it has this matte black plastic to it, and then just a gear lever sticking up like this. And putting it into reverse, it's gonna pop up the rear view camera. You do have 360 camera as well, and if you press the camera button while you're in park, you're gonna pop up the front camera as well, which is great if you decide to take this off-road, if you just add some beefier tires on this. You also have the button for the hill descent control, and again, the camera buttons are located right here as well. To the right of the gear selector, you do have 2 cup holders in addition to this white wooden trim. So it's a very light interior, this, and I'm not really used to seeing all this type of materials. You have chrome, white wood, and this white fabric in addition to white leather, for example, on the doors only. It's a lot of materials coming together in a very small piece of the door. And behind that, you do have this rotary dial for the camera settings, 360 camera, side cameras, front and rear cameras as well. Fantastic. You have the parking brake. The volume knob is located in this area as well. Now, looking at the armrest with this white leather, this is a 2-piece armrest, so you can open up one piece if you want, or you can open both of them like this. You have a pretty shallow storage compartment underneath here with 2 USB-Cs. Now, moving on to the gauge cluster, this is another reason why I'm a little bit confused as why Mazda did it this way. It's completely digital, which you would expect in this price range, but the thing is, you can't configure this at all. The only little piece area of the gauge cluster where you can configure is a tiny piece on the right side. It's almost like a circular spot where you can show some basic information. That's it. Nothing else changes on the gauge cluster. I do wish we could have this take up the whole map, for example, like we have in the Audi systems, or do something cool with it. Since it's all pixelated, what's the point of having it be completely digital if you can't configure it and customize it as you want? Moving on to the steering wheel, it's a pretty decent looking steering wheel. Not sure if I would just look at the steering wheel and feel like this comes from a $62,000 car. I feel like maybe it's a little bit too simplistic and feels a little cheap in the buttons with the hard plastics. But on the right side, you do have all the controls for the cruise control settings, and on the left side, the audio controls, and also this little button to customize that tiny little area in the gauge cluster with the info button on the left side. You can also manually shift to the 8-speed automatic if you want to with the paddles on the back side. Up top, we have a huge sunroof that stretches almost all the way back to the headrests of the passengers. And it's pretty nice. It's gonna let in a lot more light into the cabin if you wanna do that. Moving on to the seats. Again, this white and this brightness comes back in the seats. You have perforated centerpieces since this is a ventilated seat. You also have this black fabric strip in the middle, adding some contrast to the seats. There's not a lot of bolstering in these seats at all. I feel like I'm sliding all over the place. With that said, we talked about the front end of the interior. Let's jump back and have a look at the captain seats that we have in the second row. Jumping into the back seats of the 2024 Mazda CX-90, and this is my driving position up here. I'm 6'1". I have plenty of space back here. I do feel like I'm sitting very high up though. I sit a lot higher than the front passengers, that's for sure. We have 2 cup holders here. We have the controls for the 3rd zone of the climate control back here, all these buttons, and you also have heated and ventilated seats for the second row, which is fantastic. Big pocket up front in the seats in front of you, and the armrest looks pretty much identical to the one that we have up front, even though it is a little smaller. The 3rd row is not, I wouldn't say they're big enough for an adult, but they're great for children. And you also have a couple of cup holders back there, in addition to USB ports and a regular house outlet. Bloop, bloop. Alright guys, setting off in the 2024 Mazda CX-90. Under the hood, we do have a 3.3 liter inline six, and it sounds really good when you're stepping on it. Sounds great. I do think some of that noise is pumped into the cabin, but as I've said before, I don't really mind it. But I'm not sure why that would be necessary in this specific car, because the engine by itself sounds already really good naturally. So what about the power? We do have 340 horsepower. And honestly, I'm not sure if it feels like 340 horsepower. It feels maybe closer to around 300 or something like that. Feels a little sluggish to me. Let's put it in sport and see if that changes up the power delivery. Still sounds really good. And of course, if you want to, you can put it in manual mode and use the shifters. But honestly, I'm not sure why you would want to do that. It's not the most fun car to use with the shifter. Even for a big SUV like this, it still feels pretty nimble around the corners. Brakes feel pretty smooth as well. It's not too spongy, it's not too grippy. All of a sudden, it's a smooth transition. Handling is honestly really good for this type of package. Doesn't really feel like a sports car, obviously. It's Mazda's biggest SUV, but it's super smooth and comfortable even on the 21-inch wheels. What I like about Mazda these days is I think they're nailing their designs. This Kodo design language. The Mazda 3 is probably the best looking small little hatchback right now, with these soft surfaces that we have on the body, creating some very interesting reflections in the body when you're walking around it in sunshine out. Same with this car. It has the same design philosophy and same beautiful surfaces, and they managed to make a big SUV look graceful and almost elegant with all the soft surfaces that we have going on, in combination with some very strong graphics that makes it unmistakably a Mazda. Alright, so there is no one behind me, no one in front of me. Let's go to a standstill. We're in a bit of a downslope here, and let's floor it. Let's go. A bit jerky from first to second gear, and then we're up to 60. This transmission has this tendency to sometimes feel like it really doesn't know what it wants to do. Overall, I think Mazda's done a great job with the CX-90. I do wish, for example, that the infotainment screen was always a touchscreen, and that the gauge cluster was more customizable, and that we maybe had a little bit more different high-quality materials, specifically in this area of the interior, if you're gonna pay $62,000 for the car. Now, this is the inline six, and I do believe, I haven't driven the hybrid yet, but I do think I would probably go with the hybrid for the CX-90, because to me, that just makes more sense. I would probably go somewhere in the mid-level trim.